But my advice off the back of this is if you've got a transient shaper or an enveloper in your DAW, before you reach out and buy an expensive or even just buy a deverb plugin, check out what you can do with your enveloper or transient shaper, because you may well find that you don't need anything else and you might actually have the tool that you need to attenuate reverb at your fingertips.
You're listening to the Inside the Mix podcast with your host, Mark Matthews.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the Inside the Mix podcast. If you are a new listener, make sure you hit follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're a returning listener, as always, a huge welcome back. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe and chuck it a like as well. That would be lovely. Before we dig into this episode, I just want to let you know of a new format that we're going to be continuing into 2025 and hopefully beyond as well. So the episode that dropped on New Year's Eve, episode 175, where you, the listeners, submitted your music wins of 2024 and your questions. And myself and my good friend R9, Tim Benson, answered your questions on the episode. And we're going to continue this into 2025. So each month, myself and Tim are going to answer your questions on a podcast episode. All you need to do to submit a question is click the SpeakPipe link in the episode description. A short, up to 30-second audio clip. You don't need an account with SpeakPipe. You don't need a specific microphone or anything like that. It's just like sending an audio message via WhatsApp or whatever platform you use. And this is an excellent opportunity to give yourself a shout out on the podcast and reach the podcast audience. So something along the lines of, hey, this is your name. My question for Mark and Tim is whatever your question is. And then you can follow me or find out more about what I'm doing at your website, social media, whatever it is. And remember, that is going to stay on that podcast episode forever, basically. So you're going to always have new listeners finding and discovering you when they listen to that episode. And each month I will draw a lucky winner from a virtual hat to win a coffee on me. And if you don't like coffee, you can just give the voucher to someone else and pretend that you gave it to them. So click the link in the episode description and submit your questions and get featured on the podcast this year. Let's dig into this episode now. So I was working on this song of mine called Separation. It's a melodic house tune, and it actually dropped on January the 10th. And it's part of a 50-plus artist compilation in aid of a fellow producer in need who suffered an unfortunate accident. And we are raising money for this producer to help him through this difficult time. The producer's name is Outrunner, and you probably heard me mention him on the podcast before because I love his productions. So good. So we're raising money for Outrunner, and it dropped on January the 10th. There's a link in the episode description. Please do go check it out. As I say, there are some amazing artists and songs on there. It's a mix of all styles of synth music and some, obviously we've got melodic house from me here. So please do go check that out. And again, there'll be a link in the episode description. So in this song, I imported samples, and in some of these samples, there is baked in reverb. And in particular, this one we're going to use today in this demonstration. It's quite a nasty sounding reverb that's baked in, to be honest. I don't really like it. And I like to use my own reverbs anyway, and then bust my audio out to these reverbs. I don't like to have reverbs on each individual channel or VST instrument because it can get muddy quite quickly. So in this episode, I'm going to go through 3 tools I've got at my disposal here to attenuate the reverb that is baked into this sample. Now, this isn't going to be me demonstrating how to use these tools, okay? It's just going to be me comparing them and figuring out which one I like the best. So I'm not going to go through an explicit demonstration of each tool. It's just the 3 I have available and which one I think's best. So let's dive in. So here we are in Logic Pro, and we are in the project for my tune Separation. And I've got my 3 tools I'm going to be using in this episode. I've got the Logic Pro enveloper, I've got the Isotope RX De-reverb, and I've got the Acon Digital DeVerberate 3. So let's play the sample without any reverb attenuation. And I've realized I haven't put a fade in between the samples there. It's a slap on the wrist for me on that one there. I thought I'd done them all. Anyway, you can hear the reverb doesn't sound particularly nice, and I wanted to attenuate it. I don't necessarily need to get rid of it altogether because that could have a pretty detrimental effect to the sound itself. So I just want to attenuate it and then put my own reverb, or rather bust it out to my own reverb. So let's start with RX De-reverb. So de-reverb I do like because it's got the learn feature on it, which I did use in this instance. So toggles learning mode on and off, which is quite useful because it can then estimate the tail length rather than me having to try and work it out. And it will also set the reverb profile as well. Now, admittedly, I did boost the low and low mids of the reverb profile. So you've got low, low mid, and high as well. You can also enhance the dry signal because what I've noticed is when you do attenuate some of this baked in reverb, it can have an effect on the overall signal level of the audio. So that enhanced dry signal is quite useful. Now, I would prefer if it were just a gain knob that I could use instead and I could tailor it the way I want. Because when I did use it, it boosted it a touch too much for my liking. So I actually turned it off altogether. I disabled it. So let's have a listen to the RX De-reverb attenuation. So let's enable it and let's play it. Sounds pretty good, right? I can still hear some of that reverb tail in there. I don't want to attenuate it altogether because it has a detrimental effect on the envelope of the sound itself. It starts to mute it, which is not what I want when you get rid of the reverb altogether. And what is more, I've got the reduction on 20, which in RX Reverb is the overall strength of the processing. So I can't go any higher anyway. Let's enhance the dry signal. I'll put that on. Let's play that anyway. And let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, it's even more so sort of pushing that reverb tail to the back, which is quite nice. So I could use a gain tool after the RX10 De-reverb and then just attenuate the overall gain of the audio and bring that down. So thinking about it now, maybe I would leave enhanced dry signal on because it's making the dry signal stand out more, which is what it's doing, right? It's enhanced dry signal. So let's do a quick before and after. So this is without any reverb attenuation. And this is with RX10 De-reverb. It sounds pretty good. I've still got some of that reverb tail in there, but overall, the dry signal is definitely more prominent. So, and also I've got the full envelope that I want of the sound. It doesn't sound muted, which is what I don't want when I'm attenuating reverb. So let's have a listen to DeVerberate 3. So with DeVerberate 3, I've used the other reverb estimation and I've set the reverb time to 3.2, which mirrors what I did in RX10 as well. I've got the dry signal at 0, and then I've got the reverb level at -5. So this is the amount of reverberation in the input signal specified in dB. And it sounds like this. So with DeVerberate 3, the reverb has definitely been attenuated, but you've got some sort of spectral anomalies happening there. So whereas with de-reverb, it was just attenuating the reverb and you could still hear a bit of the tail, with DeVerberate, it kind of, you got this sort of digital, not noise, but it's just anomalies, artifacts happening. But you do have this spectral smoothing dial here in DeVerberate 3, which I've got set at 0. So let's boost that. So I'm going to play it and I'm going to boost it and see if it makes any difference. Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, with the spectral smoothing, it does smooth out that sort of those spectral anomalies, as it were. But for ease of use and quick results, I'm leaning towards RX10 De-reverb, to be honest with you, because I want to attenuate the level of reverb, not get rid of it altogether. And I find it's kind of the most pleasing to the ear out of the two. So, in fact, let's do an A/B again. I'm going to play the Acon Digital DeVerberate 3, and then I'll play the RX10 De-reverb. And this is RX10. Listening to it now, I might be changing my mind here. I think I might prefer the Digital DeVerberate 3 with the spectral smoothing as well. I'm thinking actually, now I've compared the two and listened to the two, the reverb is just a touch too high with RX10. I could probably go in and tweak it a bit more and attenuate that reverb. But for quick results, I think maybe the digital DeVerberate 3 might be the winner in this one. So let's look at the third and final tool, and that is the Logic Pro enveloper. Now, in any DAW, I could be corrected on this, but I'm going to hazard a guess and say there is some form of transient or envelope shaper in a DAW. So you can do this in any of them. And it's probably even easier to do this than the other two, the de-reverb and the DeVerberate 3. Because all you need to do with the enveloper, you're using the right-hand side of the enveloper in Logic, the release side. And I've got the time all the way up to 2000 milliseconds. And I've got the gain all the way down at -100. So basically, if you're watching this, you'll see there's there's a 90-degree angle on the release. So it's just really is attenuating the release time of this audio. So I'm going to play it now, and you'll hear what I mean. Now, to me, it sounds kind of like a hybrid of the de-reverb and the digital reverberate. So it's attenuated the overall level, but you've still got sort of like this stunted reverb tail. And you could play around with this. You could reduce the amount of reverb, or rather reduce the amount of gain reduction on the release. I've got it set at -100% at the moment. And I've also boosted it by 1 dB just to compensate for that overall signal level reduction because of the decrease in the release time. But out of the three, I'm leaning towards the enveloper, purely on the basis of how easy it is to use, and it's free in this instance. Now, it's going to depend on the source material, right? But my advice off the back of this is if you've got a transient shaper or an enveloper in your DAW, before you reach out and buy an expensive or even just buy a deverb plugin, check out what you can do with your enveloper or transient shaper, because you may well find that you don't need anything else, and you might actually have the tool that you need to attenuate reverb at your fingertips, native in your DAW. But again, it all depends on the source material. If you're a Logic Pro user and you want to go more in depth with the enveloper, check out episode 146 of the podcast. Quickly remove reverb from a drum loop with Logic Pro's most overlooked plugin. So that's episode 146. And also check out 145 as well, where I look at transient shaping of a snare drum. So let's do a quick playthrough of each of these three tools in order of what we've been through in this episode. So this is RX De-reverb. This is Acorn Digital DeVerberate 3. And this is the Logic Pro enveloper. And this is the original audio. So I'm going to play it in the context of the mix now with my preferred choice, which is the Logic Pro de-enveloper. So let's play it. There we go, folks. Let me know what you think if you're watching this on YouTube in the comments. What have I overlooked? Maybe something I've missed out on. Do you have a preferred tool? Please do let me know in the comments. Alternatively, you can DM me at Inside the Mix Podcast on Instagram and let me know your thoughts. And please do click the link in the episode description and check out that compilation album, 50 plus artists outrun the sun, including my tune here, Separation. So I hope that was useful, folks. Until next time, happy producing.